left, face. Forward, march.
You all can be seated. We'll start with Chief Bryant, who'll just give opening remarks.
Good evening. I'm Rodney Bryant, the Chief of the City of Atlanta Police Department, and this is probably one of the proudest moments in my 30-plus years as a member of the Atlanta Police Department to be amongst these forerunners who have left a legacy to allow us to be in the space that we're in today. The City of Atlanta nationally is recognized as one of the most integrated and diverse police departments that we have today. And it is because of these gentlemen that's sitting here with me that sacrificed so much during that time. In 1961, during the 6 p.m. watch, it was a unique time in Atlanta. This is at the height of civil rights in our city, and these gentlemen were actually the forerunners to breaking the barriers that we had. Our schools, Atlanta Public Schools, during that time was on the verge of integrating the school system, and so they had a lot of work ahead of them. And so it gives me great honor to sit amongst them and to listen to the stories that they bring and the experiences that they had to endure during that time.
Okay.
For the camera, tell me your full name and title.
Okay. Eldrin Bell, Chief of Police.
So you went to Harvard, is that correct? I'm just getting more audio level.
Yes.
And I used to hang out in Harvard.
Oh, bless you.
No, I was only when I worked for NBC there.
Okay. we were happy to have you.
So I'm going to ask you some questions. So when did you come on the force?
March 31st, 7:05 p.m.
You were part of the 6 p.m. watch?
Indeed, I was a part of the 6 p.m. watch when we were working from headquarters station.
And what class were you in?
Oh, I don't remember which class it was. Class number 30. And may I say to you that all of the people who I hired prior, other than the original class of 8, we were the first to be educated thereafter. So all of us were in there together, and class number 30. Thank you.
When you first came onto the beat, did you walk the neighborhoods, the community?
Indeed, I did. Decatur Street was my beat, what Georgia State now is. And I worked from the police department up to Pryor Street, which was 1 block before 5 Points. And all of that time, it was inhabited by black people.
In the segregated 60s, you were one of the first black police officers, and what is interesting, today's police force is nearly 60% minority or 60% black. You helped pave the way and to inspire the next generation of police. Talk about the diversity and the pride in today's police force.
Today's police force, we are still quite proud of it, and it is, of course, much of it, as you heard the chief say, is from the sacrifice of these men that you are now taking pictures of. Sacrifice turns God on. And they did it without fanfare, and they integrated the police department without fanfare. And they did an excellent, I might add, an excellent job in enforcing the laws of this city.
What's interesting about that, and I love the display, so my hat's off to Shada and her team, but the room, so the pictures behind you is history. These men represent history. What type of challenges, basically, what type of challenges and racism did you have to deal with when you first entered the force?
Well, you name it, we went through it. We had separate bathrooms, separate water fountains, separate entrances that we could come, separate areas that we were to stand. And that's how you got the 6 p.m. watch, because it was not the same as the other officers. So we had to endure all of that. But I might add, we endured with a great deal of success from those men. J.P. Arnold and I were the first to work a watch other than the 6 p.m. watch. And we started working at midnight, and our first night we brought in 13 robbers. So we weren't playing, just a little bit out there, and we did, and all of the others did that kind of a job for the Atlanta Police Department and thus the Atlanta community.
Wow, that's impressive. So you basically, you and your team were basically the original Hidden Figures.
Oh, original Hidden Figures? Oh, absolutely. They were indeed the hidden fingers of this department. The 6 p.m. watch led this department in its entirety with all of the arrests that we made, and many of the officers, the white and in detectives, came to us to get the results that they got.
So I understand the original 8 in 1948 were not allowed to arrest whites, drive vehicles. When was it permitted for you to proudly display the badge, drive a vehicle, arrest white criminals? When did that happen?
It came about shortly after, probably around 62, it started happening. It was not a singularly focused thing where we start doing it on a particular day at a particular time. The incidents caused it to happen. I remember my first citizen that I arrested, it was white, he was a lawyer. He was about to go into a store, and I told him that it was closed, and he didn't want to believe that. And he called me a few names that were unacceptable. And as a result, he had to go to the paddy wagon that was standing on the corner, and they took him by the hospital. Well, naturally, when I came on at the 6 p.m., we were primarily on foot beats, except for car 13, car 21, and later car 8. We were given it in increments. And all of the things that were given to us were incremental, including going to the bathrooms. It was all incremental. And those men that you just spoke to stood the test. And they did it without tearing up to the police department, breaking out windows, and doing what we see being done today. They did it, and were very proud to do it. And I'm happy to be among any group that will honor them for what they sacrifice, because sacrifice turns God on, and it sure turned the Atlanta community on.
And go back to your statement about the Hidden Figures. You and your team were the original Hidden Figures.
Fortunate enough, and I'm happy to say this with all respect, I'm happy to have been each one of them's boss. People used to ask me, what did I do? I told them I ran the world's largest kindergarten, and they all carried guns. And they were very good at doing what they did. And they are and will continue to be the hidden fingers of policing, not only just here in Atlanta, but countrywide. Because when I became chief, they became the best dressed police department in the country.
Does your experience rights movement and the leaders of that era. Basically, you are the history of Atlanta. You are part of the history of Atlanta. I mean, I'm sure you probably escorted MLK and presidents around the city. Do you have any memories of that?
Yes, I do. Presidents, when they came here, we worked with the Secret Service. I'm a 3-time graduate of the Secret Service Academy. And for that reason, we would, and many of them are as well, we would escort and assist the Secret Service in protecting the presidents and all others, including the kings, when we needed to. And I was fortunate enough at the end of his life to spend many nights over about 3 months or so in the graveyard with him to keep his body protected as it lay in rest at the Southview Cemetery.
And why did you and your team have to do that?
We did that because we were determined, and we were as much a part of it as the movement was, that nobody was going to destroy his casket or memory in this town.
What did it mean to you to first wear the uniform and badge? What type of pride was associated with that uniform?
That's the reason why I said to you that we were the best looking police department. We were the best acting police department. These gentlemen back here, when I told you about J.P. Arnold and the fact that we arrested 13 robbers in one night, we meant business. And we took care of our streets. But let me say this for you and your audience. We stayed in close contact with the community. We were not separate from the community. I could ask J.P. Arnold or Frank James or some of those Ernest Lyons, names of people in the community, and what happened, they knew where to go to get the information. And our people in the community worked with us as African American or black police officers.
In uniform, you fought crime, as well as fighting racism. How prevalent was that?
I missed the last part of your question.
In addition to fighting crime, you also had to fight racism in the community as well as within the race department. How prevalent was that, or how much challenge? What type of obstacles did you have to deal with?
Racism was with us in the beginning, long before we got here. If you look at the word freedom, it's a grammatical construct, the right to dominate. And we were always dominated in every instant as we were in the police department at that time. And not until I became chief that many of our units were integrated. In our horse patrol, in our Air Force unit, there were no blacks when I took over as chief of police. But when I left, they were there. But somebody had to take the ball and run with it, and I was willing to give my life for these men and run with it.
And just for in general, why was it called a 6 p.m. watch?
We were separate. Remember, that goes back to your key phrase about racism. We didn't get that just because. The white police officers went to work at 4 o'clock. We came on at 6. They got off at 12. We got off at 2. So that we wouldn't what? Run across them. When I came onto the police department in 1961, we still had some gentlemen here who professed to be a part of the Ku Klux Klan. Okay? And so, but before I left, I went to a Ku Klux Klan meeting.
I understand that many of the officers were members of the Ku Klux Klan. Many of the white officers were members of the KKK.
Yes.
That's shocking. That was shocking to learn.
No, it wasn't shocking, because I guarantee you, those men that you're looking at back there, you didn't have a scared one back there. They were not afraid. Dyke Edward Brown went with me to the Klan meeting, and they asked us why we're there. I said, you're in the city of Atlanta, we're police officers, we'll be here too.
You know, I can
Well, let's say no nonsense.
So your group, the original 8, and then your group as well, not only would the policemen break the racial barrier, but also you became a pride within the black community. Were there any obstacles when you first came into the black community? Did you face any obstacles or did you immediately, did you and your team really develop a relationship, which also developed the community policing that exists today?
Let me just say that our ministers and many of our community leaders were very, very, very supportive of us police. As a matter of fact, we probably would not have a police department had it not been for the black ministers of that day. And each year that we'd have an election, each year or each 4 years, as we had an election, if you look back at the numbers, that's when we had the increases in police. So they were grateful for us, and we were very grateful to have the opportunity to be heard and to be seen and to work. And we continued to work with them after we were in the office. They depended on us. They called on us. They invited us to their churches, and we went. And so the relationship was always there. And what I saw in latter years, the white churches did the same. And so the relationship between the Atlanta police and the religious community was strong then, is strong now.
When did, and I asked you this, but I'll ask it another way. When did this crew here, when did you start patrolling the white neighborhoods? And when were you allowed to dress among the white police officers?
Dressing among the white police officers happened, that happened before I got here. They were not allowed to wear their uniforms. Many of them had personal motorcycles. They were not allowed to ride motorcycles. I was told all of these stories, but by the time I got here, and many others who are here, we dressed in our uniforms either at home or at the station. We had choice. And those things were going away, as I said to you, incrementally. They were not just all of a sudden you're doing something that you've never done before. It was incremental. And I'm very proud to have led the men and women who accomplished that.
Also, what's interesting about your career is you helped to promote women in the police force.
Yes, sir. We had at one time as much as about 35% women. And when I came on, I identified a group of women, about 8 in number. And if you were looking at the president last week on your station, one of the women that was in that group was there as an officer in charge of a unit out of Tennessee or somewhere, I think it was Memphis. She started here. And many other women all over this area and region did it. And if I was the chief of police tomorrow, I'd start back hiring women.
So I believe I'm done, but I would like to ask, what is your proudest moment as, when you were walking the beat and also when you were chief?
It's always been with children. One of our police officers mistakenly killed a 9-year-old kid. And I went to his classroom. They were kindergartners or first graders. I sat down on the floor with those kids. My proudest moments here has been the time I spent in schools with our children. And many of those children come up to me today and remember those times we spent together. Our children didn't grow up the way they're growing up today to do the things that they did because police officers played a significant role. Our juvenile detention facility was 100 beds. That's all we had. So most of the time, those gentlemen that you see back there took children home to their grandparents. And they often straightened out the business, and we rarely had to arrest them. So my proudest moments were dealing with youth of Atlanta.
Is there anything else you'd like to add that I did not ask and was not aware of, or?
You don't have enough time.
Apparently you have a very fawning audience.
As you look at them, you got what's left. There were many more officers who are not here now. One of them, J.B. Steed, and I'll call his name, is at home very ill today. And so many of them who deserve the same honor are not here. And I'm very proud of them, very proud to be with them, and I'm very proud I ran the world's largest kindergarten in Atlanta, Georgia.
You know, one last question, just, what was it, when you first learned of losing a man, losing one of your police officers, boy, that must have been just a strike in the heart. When was the first time you had to deal with that?
I don't know the first time, but I remember when Officer Monday was killed. He and Henry Hooks, who became my father-in-law, were in that first group. And when he was killed, that was one of my saddest moments, to witness that and be a part of it, because I was coming 2 or 3 months later, I was on the police department. When I took the exam, there were 101 of us took the exam, only 2 of us passed. So we were always, so you're looking at the best of the best that came to this police department, sacrificed themselves, and lived up to their reputation throughout their career.
I understand when Officer Monday was killed,
Yes.
it changed the attitude among the white police officers because they realized the black police officers were out there fighting crime and placing their lives on the line. That's when it all changed. Is that correct?
No. I said to you, it changed incrementally. And if I had to give somebody credit, it would be the people that you're looking at. Because we actually started arresting white citizens. We started driving the cars. We made the largest number of arrests, and we solved more crime. Because we had a good relationship with the community. And I would encourage our chief today, keep that good relationship with the community. And I gave him some advice earlier, which I will not say publicly, that if he do those kinds of things, he's gonna have the same kind of police department now that we had them. And I do not bemoan them now, nor do I criticize them. I commend them for doing what they're, as well as they're doing now.
One last question, I'm sorry. When you have these type of anniversaries,
Yes,
gathering together,
yes.
boy, what does that do to you?
It goes all over. We started that back with Herbert T. Jenkins, who's the man who hired me, and I handled his case when he died. His was a wound that he created and did himself. I won't even call the name. But he left us. But we started the roundup with Marion Lee, one of our finest police officers who left the police department, went civilian, came back, and nobody would hire her, but I took her and kept her in a position until she retired. It was then that we held a roundup every year. Those are the proudest moments when I was able to visit and see all of these people and more that you see here today.
Well, there must be a lot of pride in what you developed
they are still here, and we'll be here until the last one of us go.
You're a lot of fun. Sir, please tell me your name
My name is Floyd L. Reeves.
and spell it, please, your last name.
Reeves, R-E-E-V-E-S.
And when did you enter the force?
I entered the force in 1967.
And you retired?
In 1998.
So I was told that, talk about the Magnificent Seven.
Well, the Magnificent Eight, I had the pleasure of working with four of them: Sergeant McKibbins, Sergeant Lyons, Major Dixon, and Major Ball was not one of the originals. But H.H. Hooks was the other one. By the time I joined the department in 1967, four had left. But what the eight had gone through was just unbelievably cruel and unfortunate.
And what was some of that cruelty?
Racial hatred, racial bitterness. The last hired, the first fired, the first to get demoted, the last to get promoted. And the whole Jim Crow system was in full play in the Atlanta Police Department at that time. And Chief Herbert Jenkins was the police chief at that time when I joined the department. And he wrote a book. And in his book, he indicated that at one time he too was a member of the Ku Klux Klan's party. And that was pretty much the attitude throughout the Atlanta Police Department.
What was the result of that lawsuit?
Well, the Afro-American Patrolmen's League filed a lawsuit against the Atlanta Police Department in the city of Atlanta in the federal courts. And it took, I imagine, 4 or 5 years to resolve it. But eventually, the courts ruled in the Afro-American Patrolmen's League a favor, and a consent decree was established, and the police department was obligated to give an examination or an exam that was fair and equitable and non-discriminatory. And as a result of that, a lot of promotions were made, and that was the first time that Afro-American black officers had been given the opportunity to accelerate and be promoted in the Atlanta Police Department.
Well, certainly that was a very proud achievement. When you were walking the beat, when in your career did you integrate into the city where you were you can go in, you were designated to different zones?
Well, I came on the department again in 1967, and bigotry was widespread throughout the Atlanta Police Department. And it wasn't that black officers wanted to arrest white folk. Black officers just wanted to be treated fairly and equitably and have the opportunity to arrest anybody who violated the law. Because we was always told that no one was above the law, regardless of who you were or who you are. But while at the same time, we were treated like dogs. We were treated inhumane. But to answer your question, I guess, probably 1969, 1970, Chief Redding was a police captain at that time, because what really happened, Chief Redding would make the assignment, and he would assign black officers and white officers to work together. But the white officer would get sick, and they would go home, and they would still get paid. And to Chief Redding's credit, God bless the dead, he called everybody to the driveway, black and white officers. And he said, now every time I assign you all to work with the black officer, you get sick and you go home. But the next officer that gets sick and go home, you can go home, but you won't receive no damn pay. And then at that point, white officers began to be less aggressive in their behavior publicly. They were still, wolves in sheep clothing, but things gradually began to get better. And when I say get better, because blacks were not allowed to drink, like Chief Bell indicated earlier, were not allowed to drink out of any water fountain they wanted to drink out of. They had lockers in the Atlanta Police Department, but black officers could not have lockers in the Atlanta Police Department. They were not allowed to ride motorcycles. They were not allowed to work the intelligence unit. So those assignments that were considered prestigious, black officers were not allowed to work those assignments. So about 1970, 71, things gradually began to change. And like Chief Bell said earlier, these things didn't happen all of a sudden. They happened in increments. And it still hurt when you think about it today, the way we were treated in the Atlanta Police Department. But thank God for Chief Bryant and the transition that we see in the police department today. And the whole community should get behind them, get behind him, and support them and complain less about crime, because fighting crime is our lives' responsibility.
Sir, that the memories, the painful memories still stick with you. When did it start to dissipate? I can see, you're...
Well, things gradually, like I said, began to get somewhat better around 1970, 1971. But to answer your question, when does it dissipate? I guess when we go to our grave.
When Chief Bell, what did Chief Bell and what did your team, how did it change the today's police department? When did you notice that equality really began to exist for the black police force?
Well, again, going back to the lawsuit and the consent decree, things didn't begin to get any better until Judge Moore and the federal government ruled in our favor. But even after ruling in our favor, there was still a great deal of resistance. And I'm sure in some instances, some of the resistance continued today. So it never dissipated. It's still there. It's still there. It's just not as widespread as it once was, and it's not as openly as it once was.
What do you think of your teammates?
We were like brothers and sisters when females gradually began to come on. And when the police department created the 6 p.m. watch, they meant it to be evil, but God took it for good. And black officers like W.J. Barnes, LaSalle Smith, and so many others that are here today took pride in the fact that we worked the 6 p.m. watch. And then we started calling ourselves the Buffalo Soldiers. And when the white officers saw that we took pride in the fact that we was on the 6 p.m. watch, and it was not derogatory to us, then that's when some of the resistance stopped, and some of the supervisors started assigning white officers to work with the black officers. To put it another way, assigned some of the white officers started working with the Buffalo Soldiers. So that's when it gradually began to get better.
You know, we live in a society where sports figures are celebrated, celebrities are celebrated, silicon moguls are celebrated, but it is the average person who such as yourself and your teammates, who put their lives on the line each day. You are the hero, the thankless heroes. How often? I know that you're a very humble person, but can you talk about just can you talk about just the challenges of that day and how you placed your life on the line?
Well, first of all, let me say we don't envy Lamar Jackson or Tom Brady and the rest of them that makes a large sum of money. Police officers just should be treated better and should be paid better than they are. So, and I guess we'll continue to be treated the way that we're treated until society see a greater need for our services. But again, the police have to carry themselves in a way where they are respected and trusted. So like Chief Bell indicated earlier, we have to work hand in hand with the police and the community.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Look at the camera, sir.